take time for yourself because you're so consumed with caring for someone else. Be forgiving of yourself, and then just make sure that you're making your self care a priority too, because when you're in that situation, the last thing you think about is taking care of yourself. You're totally consumed with, oh my gosh, what can I do to make this better for that person,
Mhm.
and why can't I do more?
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Soul Snacks. Uh, Cammy and I are chuckling a little bit right now because this is like our fourth take. The
Oh
first
my
few
goodness.
episodes have been great, but for some reason, we're actually recording in the afternoon, and typically we've been recording in the morning. And I think at this point, when we've started our day, it might just be that we need to, like, I don't know, have a cocktail while we're recording in the afternoon or something. But anyways, we were chuckling a little bit. Um, but this is the topic we wanted to talk about today is it's a little bit of a doozy. It's one that so we're going to talk about the role of a caregiver and how not only how it can show up for people in different situations and different lengths of time and different intensities and whatnot. But like the impact that being a caregiver in whatever capacity has on your life and also has on the life of the person that you're caregiving for. So, Cami, I would like to ask you a question to kick things off.
Ooh, I love that.
When you think of the role of a caregiver, or even a situation, specific to caregiving for you, what comes to mind?
Well, for me, the first thing that comes to mind is probably because of the most recent caregiving experience that I've had, and that was caring for my brother who was terminally ill. That one's freshest in my mind, but I think there's so many different ways that we can care for others, right? We can be a parent caring for a child. We can be a spouse caring for a husband or wife. We can be caring for a parent. Maybe you have a friend who has, been laid up or is also ill. So there's so many different ways that we can show up for others. But for me, probably the biggest one and the one that has had the most impact on my life up to this point, I mean, outside of being a mother, which that trumps everything, but being in an actual caregiver role and walking along somebody um, while they are, basically terminally ill and watching them deteriorate day in and day out, it has been the one that has really made the biggest difference emotionally for me in my life, particularly in the later part of my life.
Mhm.
So,
And because that I mean, that was so unplanned, as many caregiving situations probably are, but, like, when you talk about being a parent, right, being a mother, like, you knew that you had 9 months at least to prepare for what that
yes,
might look like, right? Versus
yes.
the situation with your brother, that was something that was completely unexpected
Oh,
for
totally. And
you.
it was unnatural, right? I mean, my
Mm,
brother was only 56 years old when he passed away.
mhm.
And he found out he had terminal cancer probably about 3 years prior, to him coming in and staying with me for the last year of his life. So, not only was I not planning it, but I don't know that I was fully prepared for it, mentally, and I had to kinda wrap my head around all of it, while I was going through it, which was definitely a challenge in itself.
Yeah, that I actually hadn't, I mean, I guess I hadn't thought about it like that because not only is it the change of situation of and we can get into it, right? Because, like, your day-to-day shifted drastically.
Mhm.
But with that situation of caregiving, you're also navigating not only the situation at hand, but the emotion, the grief, the processing, the everything that comes with the situation at hand outside of just the caregiving,
Oh
the reality of what's happening.
oh, yeah, yeah, and I don't know that anybody can ever prepare, for something like that unless they've
Mhm.
already been through it once, right? So, I feel like, if I had to go through this again, and I really hope I don't ever have to go through this again, but, as I get older, as my mom ages, the likelihood of me having to, give care in some capacity is probably pretty likely. which is good news for my mom because I feel like I am better equipped now than I was, a year and a half ago when I started down that journey and had no idea what I was doing. And I had no idea the emotional toll that it would take over that process. And I had no idea what a profound change it would bring about in myself.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's crazy. I mean, and I don't want to diminish other people's experiences as caregivers. Maybe they were in a completely different situation and it didn't involve somebody who was terminally ill.
Mhm.
So I can only speak to my experience. But like you said earlier, I mean, it was definitely a doozy of an experience. But at the same time, I wouldn't change it for anything in the world because it was so worth it.
Mhm. What it well, so, okay, like, just to kind of take people back to square one, if, like, what was the process for you deciding that you were gonna be the one to step up and care for your brother?
Well, my brother and I were always pretty close. He was 4 years older than me. We stayed in pretty good touch throughout the years. We always had a really tight bond, and he was just at a point in his life where he was feeling really down and out. He was starting to a lot of his energy was kind of going away. And my brother, he was a forester for 30 years. I mean, this is a guy that spent every day in the woods hiking 10, 12, 15 miles a day, tagging trees, working for, cultivating lumber and things like that. So, he was very active. He was very disciplined in what he ate. I mean, he was organic everything, wouldn't even drink, tap water, wanted to make sure it was filtered. So, and
Oh,
that was
wow.
for a big part of his life. I mean, he was
Mhm.
very, very, you know, pure in the way that he took care of his body. I mean, his body
Mhm.
was kind of like his temple. So, as you can imagine, for him, that was pretty shocking when he found out he had stage 3 bladder cancer.
Mm.
You know, several years ago. So we were chatting on the phone one day and I felt like the care that he was getting where he was living at the time, the medical care just didn't seem like it was great. He didn't have a lot of great options because he was at the time he was living with my mom and she lives in an area that's more rural and there's not a lot of great options that are less than 15, 20 miles. Most of the hospitals are 40 minutes, 50 minutes away where he would be going to get treatment, which when he would drive in the car and things, it would be really difficult for him because of the pain.
Mm.
So if you even went over a bump in the car, it would be really painful for him. So um, I knew that we had really good doctors over here. There was a cancer and hematology center that's like literally 5 minutes from my house. We had the extra room in our house. I wanted him to feel like he was in a place where he was supported and it was positive. And, he's always loved the west side of the state. He's always loved to be near the woods and the water. And so I talked to my husband and we decided, to have him come live with us, which in the beginning, he was like, "I don't know, you don't want that, I don't think you're gonna really want that. You better think about that." But we told him that we were here for him and we would love to have him, and that was that.
And then, I mean, it's incredible to have, a spouse that's on board with the
Yeah.
situation too. That, because it ends up not just being you being the caregiver, right? It's everybody that's involved in the situation that ends up playing a part. And I'm sure for Bill, it was, he's involved, maybe not to the extent that you were, but enough, right? It's impacting if, your brother's there day to day. It's you have
Oh,
somebody else living there.
I have to give mad credit to Bill, because Bill became my caregiver. I was Jeff's caregiver, and then he became my caregiver, and
Interesting.
I don't know that either of us thought about that prior to making the commitment to do this, but he
Mhm.
was super supportive and he was just wonderful through the whole process. I'm so thankful for him. He was just a rock and
Mhm.
continues to be a rock. So,
But so that's interesting, right? Because, like, full disclosure, when we were talking about, this topic for an episode, I kept thinking about, like, I'd known your situation with your brother, right? So when I thought of caregiver, that's what I thought about. It's what I was even going to, oh, like aging parents and what caregiving in those roles are going to look like, yada, yada, yada. I wasn't thinking about situations in my life where I had, been a caretaker or been a caregiver because they didn't seem like as extreme or as important or something. But to your point, like Bill was your caregiver while you were Jeff's caregiver, and therefore caregiving looks different in a lot of different situations. And at the end of the day, it's like we all need that person who is supporting us in order to go support somebody else or something
Oh,
else,
yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Because when you're in the middle of all of that and you're watching somebody that you love suffer, and you're just watching the deterioration day after day after day, and it's getting worse and worse and worse, and this, loving, energetic soul that you used to see, that was your older brother, you start to see him like just kind of start fading away. It's so hard to watch. And I don't know that I could have gotten through it without Bill and his help. And then also had some amazing friends in my life who I was able to talk with, and who also I feel like were my caregivers at that time. So it's really, they say it takes a village. It really takes a village to get through something like this, because you don't know how it's going to impact you until you're in it. And you really are going to want to have some people in your corner through it.
So when do you feel like you got to that point where you were like, "Oh, this isn't what I expected," or "These emotions are not what I expected," or "This is impacting me in a way that I did not expect?"
I think, I think it was pretty good for probably the first 6 to 8 months. I mean, Jeff lived with us. He moved in February, and then he passed the following January, so he was with
Mm,
us for almost a year. And for the majority of that time, he was able to get around, he was able to drive. I mean, he definitely moved slower, and he was increasingly starting to deal with pain, but he did pretty well. He didn't even take medicine, like pain medicine, until I think maybe September or October, of last year was when he started to get to a point where it was getting bad. And he had gone through a couple rounds of chemo and immunotherapy and 3 different types, and the side effects from that were so profound. I mean, those were worse than a lot of the stuff that he was dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So, I think it was more I always wanted to make sure I was home with him, or that if I couldn't
mhm.
be home, that he had somebody who could help him. So there's a lot of the making sure, and just constantly putting that ahead of everything else that you're doing in your life. Um, but then it started to get really bad, like October, November, December of last year. So around this time last year,
Mhm.
was when I noticed a huge shift. And when he was told, I think it was in November, he was told that there wasn't anything more they could do for him. And so that was a huge blow, because I think, he was so strong mentally, and he thought he somehow, some way was going to beat it. And then I think that was kind of the thing that he realized, like, I'm not going to beat this. There's just there's no way. And for such a for a, such a, he was such a person that loved life, and he just loved life. And it was so unfair to watch that happen, because that guy loved to live. I mean, he just did. And so yeah, I think it was November, December, where I at that point uh it just became like I was managing chaos, right? So there's all these different things going on behind the scenes. I'm still working full time. I'm still trying to make sure he's getting the best care that I know how to give him, while still trying to keep, sane and my sanity. But I remember feeling very sad, very depressed. I mean, one little thing that someone would say, and I would start to cry. In fact, I remember I was having dinner with you guys one night at dinner when we were in Spring Lake, and you guys asked me how I was doing. And I think I started to cry at the table just with that conversation. And
Mhm.
that was probably about 3 weeks before he passed. So that's when it got really bad, and I almost got to a point where I just wanted it to be over, because he was in such bad shape, and I didn't want him to suffer anymore, you know? So watching someone like that suffer is worse than anything.
It's like when you And because then they're and I don't wanna say, like, they're suffering also, people, I apologize that my dog is barking, so I'm gonna try real hard to edit this out, but if you hear some lab barks, just go with it.
Ba
Like,
Bauer's got something to say about caregiving.
Bauer oh, she is, like, the most, that's the place where I put the most caregiving, I think, but, hopefully she will quiet down. So, um, but what I was gonna say is that, like,
Yeah.
you're see I suspect, and based on some of the conversations that we had had too, like your general demeanor is not one like you're a very optimistic person. You have incredible emotion and depth and you feel heavily, but you also maintain that outlook, right? And you maintain that optimism and you get up and you go and you really take care of yourself. Like that is a huge priority for you. So then also being in a situation where you are not only are they not able to care for themselves, but you're not really able to care for them, and in the
Mhm,
meantime, you're not really caring for yourself either.
mhm.
And, like, the layers that that brings into a situation.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just remember feeling frazzled at the end. I felt helpless. I felt like there
Mhm,
was nothing I could do to save him, to help him. And y- that just really wreaks havoc on you
sure.
because you do anything for people you love, right?
Mhm,
So to have to witness it and watch it happen, and there's literally nothing you can do but just tell them you love them and try to support them and make sure they're taking their medicine when they should be. And, but he got so delirious at the end. I mean, the week before he passed, it was so difficult because I couldn't even really rationalize with him. He was so out of it. My other brother came to the last, few days of his life came to help me move him into a facility because that was part of his plan. He didn't want to have me at the end of his life, changing, bed sheets and stuff like that. Like he did not want that. So we did have him go to a facility where they could help him because he got to a point where he couldn't use the bathroom on his own or anything like that. And I knew, just knowing my brother Jeff and how stubborn he was, like I knew the minute that he couldn't use the bathroom on his own that he was going to be out. He was going to be out. Like he was checking out at that point, and it was literally like a day and a half to 2 days later, and he's like, "All right, peace out, y'all. Like, I don't need this anymore." And so that was it. So,
I
yeah.
mean, that's gotta be like, I don't know, I feel like there's something about, I don't know, like, when parents age and whatnot, like, maybe there's a little bit more of an understanding that, like, okay, I'm gonna have to, like, help this parent out when it gets to that point and vice versa, or a parent to a child, but when it's, like, a sibling, like a grown adult, I'm sure my
Mm.
brother would be, the same way, like, absolutely not, nobody's wiping my ass, you know?
Right. Yeah,
Like
nobody wants
like,
that. And
no.
yeah,
Yeah.
and we laughed about it too because he's like, "You're not wiping my ass." That's exactly what he said, and I'm like, "Good, because I don't wanna wipe your ass."
Yeah,
You
right?
know?
Like, I
That's
love you, and
awkward.
also, like, there's just things that I, like, can't get past, you know?
Awkward.
But so
Um
well, I was just gonna say, like, when I know you had mentioned, though, too, like, at some point, right? Like, it was clearly a pivotal, experience for you. It was one that you would not, change in a heartbeat. So, like, when do you think you got to the point where, like, that was starting to set in, right? Where the not when you were, like, over the hump or anything like that, because I don't feel like that's an accurate way to portray it, but when you were starting to see the beauty and the meaning and, those pieces to it.
I think, um, probably the last couple of days when he was finally, he was basically sleeping. He didn't wake up or anything like that. I knew that it was coming to an end, and, I was with him when he took his final breath, which haunted me for, a
Mm,
couple months afterwards, but because I've never witnessed anything so, like, absolutely horrifying and beautiful at the same time, right?
mhm,
So it's like you can't even describe it unless you've watched it and you've
mhm,
been there. Um, but I'm so glad I was there with him because he was really just, it was very peaceful. Um, he took his last breath. I knew in that moment that he was out of pain and
mhm,
that he was free. And then I just felt like this huge relief that, oh my gosh, he's not suffering anymore. And I'm so glad that he's out of that pain, and as much as you don't wanna say goodbye to somebody and you're so sad that you're never gonna be able to, have a conversation with them or spend time with them, you're also incredibly relieved that they're out of that horrific pain, and
Sure.
suffering because his life wasn't anything what he would have wanted that last year,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
was really tough to watch.
yeah.
So yeah,
That
so that was when it kind of turned into I started to accept after that moment, I felt such a profound relief from all of it. Then I just wanted to be able to honor him every way that I could moving forward and just keep like, him with me in my soul as I journeyed on. But just take that experience as a beautiful, life changing experience that it did make me realize, like, oh gosh, so much that I never ever thought of before I had that experience with him. So I'm grateful for it. I'm truly grateful that I was able to be in that position and to help him, until the very end.
and have a whole new appreciation for people that are in end of life care and hospice and those,
Oh,
I mean,
oh my
they're like
gosh.
miracle workers, honestly.
They're incredible. I mean, our hospice nurses were amazing, the doctors were amazing, and man, they know when it's time, it's time. They know, the lady came down, she said, "He's ready to go." She said a prayer, and a minute and a half later, he was gone. So it's just wild how they know.
Mhm.
So it is definitely a life-changing event, and, I think what I've taken out, of it the most is I just don't stress out and worry about the same kind of things that I used to stress out and worry about.
Mm.
Because, you know, 90% of the stuff that I used to stress about, it's not life threatening. It's just dumb stuff that I make up in my head and think
Yeah,
that, you know what I mean? It's
yeah.
really all these things we worry about out of fear, fear of failure or afraid of what somebody's going to think, or, did I let somebody down, or, all the
Mhm.
things that we worry about. It really helped me kind of prioritize what I worry about, because
Yeah.
now it's the important stuff. And I'm so much more grateful for everything I have. Like, I used to hate to
Mhm.
go to the gym. Now I look at it like I am so grateful I get to go to the gym,
Yeah, yeah.
I get to drive in my car to work, I'm in a traffic jam. I get to be in a traffic jam because I'm still driving and I'm healthy and I'm in a car and I
Mhm,
have a life. So
mhm,
I look at things completely differently now.
mhm. Well, and I feel like that situation was really pivotal for you in terms of, like, I don't wanna say, like, some spiritual awakening or whatnot, but I feel like during that time is when you really started to connect more with, because I know it's like you were getting signs from your dad and, like, wanting to make sure that, Jeff was being cared for and that you were really starting to, like, tap into other things too that I'm not saying happened because of that situation, but I feel like there may have been some,
Oh, yeah.
overlap and whatnot with them.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it definitely played into a spiritual awakening because Jeff and I used to talk about what happens after you die, and I think that's always a question people want to know, right? What happens when we die? Some people think when you die. Like Jeff, he was a scientist, right? And he believed that death, when you're done, you're done. You can't, there's no more. It just, you cease to exist and that's it. And
Mhm,
I used to, respectfully argue with him, and I told him that that can't be it because energy can never be destroyed. So it
mhm,
doesn't matter if your body's gone, your physical existence is gone. There's still got to be some form of energy or essence or something that is still around, because you cannot, like, it's the law of physics, right?
mhm,
You're not just going to be gone forever. So
mhm.
um, so we talked about it a lot, and I honestly, it started me down a whole another path of like, what does happen when we die, and what is the process going to be like when I die, and what are the signs I need to look for when he dies, and how can I communicate with him after he dies? I mean,
Mhm.
so I started seeking out a lot of podcasts and books and things like that, and I stumbled across a lot of like a podcasts relating to near death experiences, and was fascinated with, some of those because
I love those.
they're so interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just and what's so crazy to me about them is that I've listened to probably hundreds of them now at this point, and, they're all so similar. Like,
Right.
they're just, like, everyone's having the same type of experiences. I mean,
Yeah.
there's subtle differences, but
Mhm.
they're all very much the same,
Mhm.
and I just don't know how that could be possible if there wasn't something else,
Mhm. Mhm.
outside of our physical existence.
I remember when, so my grandfather one of my grandfathers passed away when I was in my early 20s, and it was a really peaceful like, he'd been in the hospital, but then came back and, had hospice come in, and so it was a peaceful ending to his life. He was older, had Parkinson's and stuff like that, but I remember, like, excuse me, the last maybe, like, 24 or 48 hours before he passed, at one point, like, he wasn't responsive to any of us there, but
Mhm,
he was responding to something else, like,
mhm,
it's almost like his face was kind of lighting up, he was looking, like, past people in the room to something else, and, as a young 20-year-old, it was one of those things where you're like, "Oh, like, what there's gotta be something that you're reacting to
mhm.
because of the way that the expressions on your face and whatnot right now." So, that was, I think, one of the really first times where I thought, "There's gotta be something else." And not where maybe I shouldn't say it was one of the first times I thought that, but where it was almost, like, validated, right? Like, there's
Mhm.
something else after we leave this planet in our physical being.
Yeah, and when I was in the facility with him, I was probably maybe 3 or 4 hours before he passed. He actually had a bird feeder right outside of his window, and he was a big bird guy. He loved birds. And, he was kind of laying on his side, kind of facing the window, and all of a sudden, on that bird feeder, all these birds were, like, just in an absolute ruckus. I mean, they were going nuts outside the window for no reason. They just started up, they were flying, they were, like, literally hovering, like, right outside the window, like, looking in the window, flying all over the place, and then all of a sudden, they just all took off.
Oh my gosh.
And, I actually had bird and forest sounds playing in the hospital room because I wanted him to have, like, a peaceful because he loved the woods and the forest more than anything, so I had that playing in the background, and, it was just a very calm, place to be, but, I just thought that was so wild. I'm like, is his soul departing from his body right now and just, like, his physical is still hanging on? Like, what is happening? But
Yeah.
it was wild.
I mean, literally, there were wild birds.
There were
It's
wild
like
birds, yeah.
his buddies came to take him away. Was he aware of that? Like, did you was
Mm-mm.
he no, at all at that
No,
point?
no, he wasn't, but, I had stayed with him the day before when he was still out of it. He was just laying there sleeping, but, there were a couple of times where he would get fidgety and he would kind of, like, go like this, like he'd have his eyes closed, but almost like he was reaching for something or trying to touch something. Um, but he wasn't talking or anything, so I don't know what he was seeing. I don't know what was happening, but, I don't know. I'm convinced that he's in a great place and that I mean, I really feel like I really feel like he's in a much better place, and I believe that my dad came and brought
Mhm.
him home. I really do, you
Well, and
know?
we were I mean, before we started recording, we were talking about how, like, so we're recording this the week of Halloween
Mhm,
and Samhain and, Dia de los Muertos and, All Hallows Eve, and it's a time of year where the veil, they say, is thinning, right? And there's
mhm,
all of these beautiful traditions and celebrations that, um incorporate our ancestors and incorporate the other world and the spiritual realm and sort of stuff. So the timing looks kind of worked out like this that we were talking about caregiving and your experience with Jeff because it's very much like there's an energy around it right now.
mhm.
I know you were even talking about this morning how you
Yeah.
felt that.
Yeah, just walking in the woods this morning. I was just going for a little morning hike and went through a little patch of pines that are kind of off the beaten path by my house. And I actually had spread some of Jeff's ashes under a tree there that I pass all the time. In fact, it's the same exact spot where a year and a half ago I felt my dad's presence while I was walking in that same area. So I ended up putting the ashes right at that same tree.
Oh, wow.
When I looked over on that tree a year and a half ago, there was a red heart on the tree. Like it was the bark, but it was like literally a perfect red heart, like on the tree.
Oh my gosh.
So this morning I was just walking and the sun was coming up and you could see the rays like kind of coming through the pines. And I just got this like really overwhelming feeling of warmth and love. And it was like right before I got up to like where I had put his ashes. And
Mm,
yeah, it was pretty cool. I actually I talked to him for a little bit and told him I missed him and loved him. And then I went on my merry way. But those little magical things happen every now and again, and to me,
yeah.
it's just reassurance. I think he still communicates with me in all these different ways, and I'm open to it, and I'm
Mhm,
noticing it, which is kinda
mhm.
cool.
Do you, okay, so when you're out in the woods and you're walking and talking to him, are you, like, talking out loud or are you having a conversation in your mind?
Oh, I talk out loud.
Okay.
I do.
I do too, I'm like, "Whatever."
People probably think I'm the crazy lady with the dog, but I don't care.
Totally.
No, there's hardly ever anybody out there. I've never
Yeah,
run into anybody in the middle of talking to myself, but I
yeah.
probably would just pretend like I was listening to a song or something.
Well, and there's something that, like, there's something and I don't know, maybe it's different for everybody, but when it comes to actually expressing, that feels so much different than just thinking about it, right? So
Mhm.
if I am I mean, in so many different situations, if I'm angry, if I'm emotional, if I wanna speak with my grandparents or something, actually hearing it come out and hearing my voice behind it and knowing that, like, the energy is actually leaving my system and going out into the world, I feel like it's just, like, I feel like it has not that it has more impact, but there's something that I think is really beneficial, at least for myself, versus
Mhm.
just, like, having a conversation in my head with my grandparents or something like that. Like, I'll be driving in my car, like, sometimes literally talking probably looks like I'm talking to myself, although maybe it just looks like I'm on a phone call now with all the cars and
Yeah.
Bluetooth and whatever, like, nobody
Yeah.
knows, but I'm just driving talking to myself,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
or to
I know.
whatever is out there.
I do it too. I know. I do. I talk to him all the time. I talk to my dad
Mhm,
all the time. Nothing is ever going to convince me that they're not
mhm,
still here in some
mhm.
form. I just can feel it. We talked
Yeah,
about that on another episode about how you can just feel things. And I'm a very emotional, I feel things very deeply. So,
yeah,
um, yeah, I think he's okay. I think he's in a much better place and he's much happier now. So,
I'm sure. I mean, what would you say to somebody who's either, like, approaching that situation and, possibly a situation like that, or is in kind of, like, the thick of it, especially when you think back about the really difficult times for you?
um, I guess I would probably, tell them not to beat themselves up because there were a couple incidences, later on when I got really frustrated with Jeff,
Yeah.
because again, you have all of these emotions and you're so frustrated because you're trying to manage all this chaos around you, and when the person that you are trying to help, gets frustrated with you, or they're not doing what you want them to do, or, you're trying to, make, whereas you're really trying to make everything better for them, but they're not seeing it that way. And you get in an argument, then you beat yourself up like, oh, why did I get so mad at him? So I would tell people that, to give themselves a break, right? To just know that it's never gonna be perfect, and your loved one knows that you're doing the best you can, and that
Mhm,
they love you for doing it, and they're so appreciative that you're doing it, and you really are an amazing person, and you have to remember that for helping and being in that position and volunteering to be in that position, because it's a really, really, really tough spot to be in. And it's really easy to forget to take care of yourself, and to take time for yourself because you're so consumed with caring for someone else.
mhm,
So, yeah, be patient, be forgiving of yourself, and then just make sure that you're making your self care a priority too, because when you're in that situation, the last thing you think about is taking care of yourself. You're totally consumed with, "Oh my gosh, what can I do to make this better for that person?"
mhm,
And why can't I do more?
mhm. Well, and I think that's, like, true no matter honestly, no matter what the caregiving role is, right? No
Oh,
matter what the situation is, it's easier to focus on the other person involved. And I would think that a lot of people end up, there's that saying, it's like you can't fill from an empty cup, right? Or you
right.
can't pour from an empty cup. So, but in those moments, like nobody's thinking about how to necessarily take care of themselves. Um, Especially when situations end up being pretty, significant.
Oh,
So
yeah.
from like, what do you think? And like, friends, let's be real. I feel like I've just started like interviewing Cami about this caregiving experience, which is not necessarily the intent, but I just ask questions, and I feel like it's a really significant caregiving event, right? So I was going to ask, in this interview, Cami, um, what do you think? Like, what were some of the most basic, simplest ways that you started to care for yourself in that moment? If you're like, okay, I know I can't do everything, but just the things that I need to be mindful of for myself right now.
I think, like, I would make my daily walks a priority. I would get out into the woods because that's kind of my sacred spot where I can get out and have some clarity and kind of get away from everything. I would try to, I used to like to read, so I would kind of, post up downstairs away from everything and just kind of find my own little spot and just read for an hour or two. Baths, I would take baths with a candle, and just
Mhm,
kind of like try to meditate and breathe and like talk myself through like the angst. And you really feel this like deep seated like you're just so sad. I don't want to call it depression. It's more just a deep sadness.
mhm.
Um, you almost feel helpless, and sadness is just, overcome. You just are overcome with that. So you have to find ways to kind of breathe through it. So those were some of the things that I did.
Mhm.
Um,
But none of which, like, all very, I don't want to say simple, but accessible ways to do things, right? Like nothing was
mhm.
like these big, grand anything. It was literally like go for a walk or
Yeah.
take a bath or sit down and read even, just these little things that give you a sense of kind of nurturing.
Yeah, and I didn't, and I'll be honest with you, and I don't know if other listeners who have been in this situation felt this way too, but I really I didn't wanna share a lot of what I was going through with anybody because it was so
Mm,
personal that
mm,
I had a hard time sharing my emotions with other people. In fact, I tried to avoid those conversations because I knew every time somebody asked me how I was doing, I couldn't be honest and say I was doing okay. So I would try really hard to just deflect or not put myself in a position where I had to have like a one-on-one conversation with somebody who was going to ask me how everything was going because I knew I was going to break down. So the way that I took care of myself was really more of the self-care, self-soothing type things that were just me by myself. Does that make sense?
it does make sense.
I mean, it's kinda sad if you think about it, but, I think people have a tendency when they're in a situation where things are really tough, um, they have to kinda figure it out on their own, you
Mhm.
know?
Well, and it's hard to ask for help. Like, I don't know
Mhm.
anybody who asks for help easily. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
Eh, I don't know why that's the case, right? Because it always feels good to help other people,
It
right? Like
does.
it can be challenging and whatnot, but I would say more times than not, it feels better to help. It's so hard to ask for help though. And it's hard to also admit, like, hey, if I'm struggling, right? Or if this is really hard, this is not what I thought it was going to be. I feel there's some times where I feel guilty for also feeling this way because I know here my brother's life is ending, but I'm also kind of annoyed and pissed that I don't have my space to myself. Like
Yeah.
all of it is hard to share with other people and or ask for somebody to come in and help navigate some of that with you. I feel like that's
Oh,
a normal thing.
yeah, and you hit the nail on the head because there were days that I felt like that. I just want my own house back. I just want
Mhm,
my sanity back. I just wanna
mhm,
feel good again? But then you feel so incredibly guilty for even having those thoughts because you're not the one that's, like, knocking on death's door, right? You're the
mhm,
one
mhm.
watching somebody who is going through the situation, and then you feel guilty because you have moments where you're angry.
Mhm.
So yeah, the whole thing is just it's just a tough thing to go through, and I feel for any caregiver that's having to walk that path, you know?
Well, and I think so I mean, that there's a concept, and I can't remember what the, like, what the concept is called, but where it's like your needs, like your situation is not as extreme as your brother's situation, right? Like you're caring for him, he's dying. So like if not that it's a comparison thing by any means, but people would think that his is more extreme. But it doesn't downplay how you're feeling, right? It doesn't downplay the severity of your situation as well and navigating all of the things. But it's so easy to diminish how like, "Oh, I'm not gonna feel angry," or "My emotions aren't valid," or all of this other stuff because somebody else's situation is worse, when in reality, like, your situation still gets to be really difficult because you're still having to navigate through it. It's still all totally unfamiliar. They're still very real emotions, and I'm sure in that situation, it brought up a lot of stuff for you too from different situations in life, right? So, it's always it's so easy to to put our effort into other people's stuff and diminish our own stuff when
Mhm.
our own stuff is really important too.
It is, and, we had gone to a couple of cancer, like, where you get together with other cancer survivors, at, like, an
Mm,
outreach group and stuff, and that was one of the things that they kinda drove home a lot was, if you're a caregiver, that, that is just as hard. Like,
mhm,
it's hard in its own way, right? Different, but
mhm,
equally as hard.
mhm,
Um and you're right. The asking for help part is really tough, especially I come from a family where we were never taught to be vulnerable, right?
mhm,
We are strong, independent people and we take care of our own shit. And we do it with, we pull up our bootstraps, we trudge through the crap and we figure it out. And we don't need anybody else to help us do that. So, you know, um, I didn't wanna ask for help from anybody, but I would tell anybody who's in that w situation now, like, don't be afraid to ask for help because people will love to help you. Your
mhm,
friends and your family, your loved ones will step up to the plate and help you, and they'll be happy that they could,
mhm.
you know?
And I think so that's I also sometimes wonder if with women specifically, that role of caregiver and the whether it's what we've been told or exposed to or whatnot, like how we have to do it all or that we have to show up in a certain way, that we have to really put our needs aside and like and I know men I know there's a different part of that that men probably struggle with that is unique to them, right? But I do feel like women especially have this you've got to do everything, be everything, hold it all
Mhm.
together, tie up the bootstraps, don't ask for help, like all the stuff, right?
I know, and I don't know why did we ever put ourselves in that role? I can't figure that out. But it is so
Well,
true because I think we feel like we're independent women, right? Or
yeah.
we are like the mom in the family or we're the wife. We are
Mhm.
in this position where we do have to hold it all together. And I don't
Yeah,
know.
man, I could go down such a rabbit hole, I think, with that.
Mm,
And I
me too.
because like my brain right now is thinking like, well, did we sign up for it or was it more of a thing that based on generations and centuries and patriarchal societies was just kind of like put on us? But then I think about like the innate women that or the innate power that women have. Like we can literally birth like create
Yeah.
life, birth children into a world like that, like I think there is such power that women have and that it's just like, what situations do we share, right? Like, how do we know that, like, we have this power to share and that we can do all these things without burning ourselves out, while still taking care of ourselves, while still nurturing ourselves? So, like, I love the independence and the power and all that stuff, but not at the cost of all of the other pieces. And I think the other side of it, the nurturing, the nourishment, the taking care, the asking for help, the community, I think that stuff in some ways was either, like, pushed down or not ever really encouraged, maybe
Mhm.
way back in the day when there were
Mhm.
actual communities and all sorts of stuff, but yeah, I digress. I feel like we could totally
That
go
could
down that rabbit hole.
I could go down that rabbit hole too because yeah,
Yeah. The
and it's
independent woman, that'll be a different episode.
yeah, yeah, exactly. That is actually one that we have coming.
Oh.
I was just, working on that last night actually,
Oh, I
Becca,
dig
so
it. I dig it. Look
little
at that.
foreshadowing
A
there.
little foreshadowing. All right.
But yeah, I think time, time heals all when you're in a
Mhm.
caregiving situation. And you go through it, you process. I'm still processing a lot of the things
Mhm.
that happened, in the last year and a
Sure.
half. And I will continue to process probably for the rest of my life, but it's getting easier. Every day is getting easier. I still talk to Jeff every day. I still miss him so much. But he lives in my heart
Mhm.
and he will always live in my heart. And so in from that regard, like I'm so thankful I had all that time I got to spend with him before he passed because we did have some amazing moments, you know. So
Yeah. That's
yeah.
really special. I will say his, memorial service that you guys did was like I didn't know Jeff well
Yeah.
by any means, but you got a sense for him and it just felt like it was a really um lovely, casual, genuine
Oh yeah.
memorial.
Well,
So
that was
beer
exactly
was
what he
spilled and
wanted.
everything.
That's right. I have no doubt he was there. I mean, it had his vibe all over it. He wanted people to drink and be merry and tell stories and laugh and have a great
Mhm.
day and just like remember him as this great guy, this
Mhm.
great loving soul that loved life. And that's exactly what people did. And
Yeah.
it was perfect for him. So,
Yeah. And that
yeah.
probably makes you that much more grateful for the experience that you got to spend with him the last year of
Oh,
his life.
100%. Yeah.
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 Well, all right, friends. Maybe we'll wrap it up there.
Yeah.
And we'll do we started the episode thinking that we'd go into tangents on like different types of caregiving and whatnot, but maybe that's just what happens when you get two friends together and they just start chatting.
I know, I
So
know. I feel like
we'll do another one.
the less we prepare, the better the better the conversations are. So
Yeah.
we're just
Yeah.
gonna wing it from here. But yeah,
Yeah.
I would say to any of you out there that are listening that is going through a caregiving time or that you have one coming, just be patient with yourself and just make sure that you get the help that you need and don't be afraid to ask for help and spend some time in solitude, just kind of processing everything because it's really tough.
Yeah. If you need a lifeline to call and vent, you can just reach out to us too. Um, we'll chat with you.
We love to chat. Can you tell?
We'll be there. If you don't want to ask anybody in your actual life or talk to anybody in your actual life, we'll be your friends.
That's right. All right.
All right.
Well,
Well,
thanks
we will.
everybody.
Yeah, we'll chat with you guys next time.
All right. See ya.
See ya.